Elliot Carter was a man of few words and even fewer ambitions. His life revolved around the hum of engines, the clink of tools, and the satisfaction of fixing something broken. He lived in a small workshop tucked away at the edge of Nova Port, one of the busiest spaceports on the outer rim of human-occupied territory. It wasn't glamorous work, patching up old freighters and outdated shuttles for traders too stingy to upgrade, but it paid the bills. And besides, Elliot preferred machines over people. Machines didn't lie or argue, they just needed someone who understood them. The spaceport buzzed with activity every day. Ships from all corners of the galaxy docked here, carrying cargo, passengers, and sometimes trouble. Pilots haggled over fuel prices, merchants shouted about deals that were too good to miss, and children ran wild through the crowded corridors, dodging droids and luggage carts alike. Amidst all this chaos, Elliot's workshop stood as an island of calm. Its walls were lined with shelves holding spare parts, wrenches, and diagnostic panels. A faded sign above the door read, "Carter's Repairs. Fast, reliable, affordable." Most customers ignored the last part after seeing his rates. On this particular afternoon, Elliot had been elbow-deep in the guts of a malfunctioning mining drone when he heard the soft whir of unfamiliar thrusters outside. Pausing mid-repair, he wiped grease-streaked hands on his coveralls and stepped out to investigate. What he saw made him blink twice. A sleek, otherworldly ship hovered near the docking bay. Its surface shimmered like liquid metal, reflecting the harsh artificial lights of the station. Intricate patterns resembling glowing runes pulsed faintly across its hull, shifting colors in a mesmerizing rhythm. The design was unlike anything Elliot had ever seen before. Human ships were bulky and functional, built for endurance rather than elegance. This vessel looked like it belonged in a dream, or perhaps a nightmare. Before Elliot could get closer, the ship's hatch hissed open, revealing a figure silhouetted against the light inside. She stepped out slowly, her movements graceful yet cautious. Her skin was silver, catching the light in a way that seemed almost ethereal. Bioluminescent markings traced delicate paths along her arms and neck, glowing softly in hues of blue and green. Her eyes, large and almond-shaped, scanned the area with sharp intelligence. She was beautiful, but also clearly not human. Elliot froze, unsure whether to approach or retreat. Before he could decide, she spoke, her voice melodic but tinged with urgency. You fix ships?" Her accent was strange, lilting in a way that suggested she wasn't fluent in galactic standard, the universal language most species used to communicate. Still, her meaning was clear enough. Elliot nodded hesitantly. "Yeah, I do. What's wrong with yours?" She gestured toward the shimmering craft behind her. "It stopped working. I don't know why. Please, you must help me." There was desperation in her tone, a vulnerability that softened Elliot's usual skepticism. He glanced around the bustling spaceport, half expecting some sort of trick or ambush. But no one else seemed to notice the alien visitor or her extraordinary ship. Everyone was too busy with their own affairs. "All right," Elliot said finally, stepping forward. "Let's take a look." As he approached the ship, he felt a strange sensation, a kind of warmth radiating from its surface, as though it were alive. When he placed his hand on the hull, the glowing runes brightened momentarily, responding to his touch. Startled, he pulled back, but the woman smiled faintly. "It likes you," she said simply. "What is this thing?" Elliot asked, his mechanics, curiosity overriding his unease. "Some kind of experimental tech?" She shook her head. "It is difficult to explain. Just please, fix it." Realizing there was no point in asking more questions right now, Elliot grabbed his toolkit and began examining the ship. The engine compartment was accessible via a panel that slid open smoothly at his touch. Inside, he found components that defied logic, circuitry that seemed organic, wires that pulsed with energy, and mechanisms that moved without any visible power source. It was both fascinating and frustrating. How was he supposed to repair something so alien? Despite the challenges, Elliot worked methodically, running diagnostics and testing connections. Hours passed unnoticed as he became absorbed in the task. The woman watched him silently, occasionally offering snippets of information about how certain systems functioned. Her name, he learned, was Lyra Vex. She came from a distant star system, though she avoided specifics about her homeworld or purpose. At one point, Elliot paused to ask, "Why did you come here? There are bigger stations with better facilities." Lyra hesitated, her luminous eyes flickering with emotion. "I had no choice. My journey, it brought me here. And now—" She trailed off, glancing nervously at the entrance to the docking bay. Elliot frowned. "Now what?" Before she could answer, the distant sound of boots echoed through the corridor. Several figures in dark uniforms appeared, scanning the area with handheld devices. They didn't seem to notice the workshop, but their presence sent a chill down Elliot's spine. "Who are they?" he whispered urgently. Lyra's expression hardened. "They cannot find me. Not yet." Elliot didn't press further. Instead, he returned to his work with renewed determination. Whoever these people were, they weren't friendly. And if Lyra trusted him enough to seek his help, then he owed it to her to finish the job. As the minutes ticked by, the glow of the ship's runes grew steadier, signaling progress. For the first time in years, Elliot felt truly alive, driven by a sense of purpose he hadn't known he'd been missing. By the time the mysterious soldiers moved on, Elliot had managed to stabilize the ship's core systems. Exhausted but satisfied, he turned to Lyra. "That should hold you for now, but I need more time to fully repair it." Lyra nodded gratefully, her bioluminescent markings dimming slightly as tension left her body. "Thank you," she said softly. Then, after a pause, she added, "You have done more than fix my ship. You have given me hope." Elliot shrugged, uncomfortable with gratitude. "Just doing my job." But deep down, he knew this wasn't just another repair gig. Something about Lyra and her extraordinary ship had changed everything. Little did he know, his life would never be the same again. The next morning, Elliot woke up with a strange feeling lingering in his chest. It wasn't just exhaustion from the long night of repairs. It was something deeper, harder to explain. He couldn't shake the image of Lyra's glowing eyes or the way her ship seemed almost alive. As he sipped his coffee and stared blankly at the wall of his tiny quarters above the workshop, he replayed their conversation in his mind. She had been vague about where she came from, why her ship broke down, and who those soldiers were searching for. Her evasiveness should have made him wary, but instead it only fueled his curiosity. By midday, Lyra returned to the workshop. She carried herself with quiet dignity, though there was an edge of tension in her movements. Her bioluminescent markings shimmered faintly, as if reacting to some unseen force. Elliot greeted her cautiously, unsure whether to demand answers or simply focus on finishing the repairs. "I've been thinking," he began, gesturing toward her ship. "There's still a lot I don't understand about this thing. If you want me to fix it properly, you'll need to tell me more." Lyra hesitated, her gaze flickering toward the open doorway as if expecting someone or something to appear. Finally, she nodded. "You deserve to know, but not here. Can we speak somewhere private?" Elliot glanced around the cluttered workshop. It wasn't exactly ideal for secrecy, but it would have to do. He closed the heavy metal door and locked it before turning back to her. "All right, talk." She took a deep breath, then began. "My people are called the Valith. We live far beyond your known systems in a place humans rarely travel. Our world—" Her voice faltered, and for a moment sadness clouded her luminous features. "It is dying. War has torn us apart. Resources are gone. My mission is to find a way to save what remains." Elliot frowned. "And that crystal core in your ship? Is that part of it?" "Yes," she said softly. "The core is ancient technology, created by our ancestors. It holds immense power, enough to heal our planet, if used correctly, but others seek it too. They wish to use its energy for destruction." Her words sent a chill down Elliot's spine. He had guessed there was more to her story than a simple mechanical failure, but this was bigger than he'd imagined. "Who are they?" he asked. "Those soldiers yesterday?" Lyra nodded grimly. "They call themselves the Caliph Syndicate, mercenaries, scavengers. They care only for profit. They will stop at nothing to claim the core." Elliot rubbed the back of his neck, trying to process everything. "So why did you come here? Why risk landing in such a crowded spaceport?" "I had no choice," Lyra admitted. "My ship detected damage during flight. Without repairs, I wouldn't have made it much farther, and I sensed something here, something unusual." She looked at him pointedly. "Something trustworthy." Elliot raised an eyebrow. "You mean me? You fixed my ship when others might have turned me away. You didn't ask for payment up front. That means something." Her words caught him off guard. He wasn't used to being seen as trustworthy or even noteworthy. Shrugging uncomfortably, he changed the subject. "Let's get back to work. The sooner we finish, the sooner you can leave this station." As they returned to the ship, Elliot noticed something strange. Every time Lyra touched the hull, new symbols appeared among the glowing runes. They pulsed rhythmically, almost like a heartbeat. Intrigued, he reached out tentatively, brushing his fingers against the surface. To his surprise, the ship responded immediately. The runes brightened, swirling into intricate patterns that seemed to form shapes resembling constellations. "What's happening?" he asked, pulling his hand back. Lyra smiled faintly. "It recognizes you. Few outsiders can interact with a Valith vessel like this. You must have a natural affinity for it." "Great," Elliot muttered. "Just what I needed. A spaceship that likes me." Despite his sarcasm, he couldn't deny the thrill of discovery. For all his years fixing machines, he'd never encountered anything like this. Each panel he opened revealed new marvels, components that defied conventional engineering, mechanisms that seemed to adapt to his touch. It was exhilarating and terrifying. Late that evening, as Elliot worked on recalibrating the ship's navigation system, he accidentally triggered a hidden compartment near the core chamber. A soft hum filled the air, and a crystalline object rose from within the ship, suspended in a beam of light. It pulsed with a warm, golden glow, radiating waves of energy that made the hair on Elliot's arm stand on end. Lyra gasped, rushing forward. "No, don't touch it!" But it was too late. Drawn by instinct, or perhaps sheer stupidity, Elliot brushed his fingertips against the crystal. In an instant, his vision exploded with images. He saw vast alien landscapes bathed in twin sunsets, towering cities crumbling under the weight of war, and desperate faces pleading for salvation. He heard voices speaking in languages he didn't understand, felt emotions so raw they brought tears to his eyes. And through it all he saw Lyra, not as she was now, but as a young girl standing amidst ruins, clutching the crystal close as if it were her last hope. When the visions faded, Elliot stumbled backward, gasping for air. His heart pounded wildly in his chest. Lyra steadied him, her expression a mix of concern and awe. "What was that?" he managed to choke out. "The memories of my people," she whispered. "The core holds fragments of our history. By touching it, you've connected with them." Elliot shook his head, trying to clear the lingering echoes of what he'd seen. "Why would you let me do that? What if it hurt me?" "It wasn't meant to harm," Lyra explained. "The core chooses who it bonds with. You weren't supposed to—" She stopped abruptly, realization dawning on her face. "This changes things." "What do you mean?" Lyra hesitated, then spoke slowly. "Among my people, forming a bond with a vessel's core is sacred. It creates a connection, not just between you and the ship, but between you and its owner. By touching the core, you've become tied to me, to my journey." Elliot stared at her, disbelief warring with unease. "Are you saying I'm stuck with you now?" "No," she said firmly. "You can walk away anytime you choose, but the bond exists nonetheless. Whether you realize it or not, you're already part of this." Her words hung heavy in the air. Elliot wanted to argue, to insist that none of this mattered. that he was just a mechanic doing his job. But deep down, he knew she was right. From the moment he'd touched the crystal, something inside him had shifted. He felt it in the way the ship responded to his presence, in the way Lyra looked at him now, with trust and gratitude. "Fine," he said finally, breaking the silence. "I'll help you finish the repairs. But once your ship's ready, you're on your own, got it?" Lyra nodded, though her smile suggested she doubted his resolve. "Thank you, Elliot, for everything." As they continued working, Elliot found himself glancing at Lyra more often than he cared to admit. There was strength in her posture, resilience in her gaze. Whatever hardships she'd endured, they hadn't broken her. And despite the danger surrounding her, she carried herself with a quiet determination that inspired respect. By the time they called it a night, the ship was nearly operational again. But as Elliot locked up the workshop and prepared to retreat to his quarters, he couldn't shake the feeling that their paths were intertwined in ways neither of them fully understood yet. Whatever lay ahead, one thing was certain. Elliot Carter's life had changed forever, and there was no going back. The days that followed were a blur of activity for Elliot and Lyra. Each moment spent working on the ship brought them closer, not just physically, as they labored side by side in the cramped confines of the workshop, but emotionally, as their conversations deepened and barriers began to fall. At first, Elliot had tried to keep things strictly professional. He focused on the technical details, asking only practical questions about the ship's systems or how certain components functioned. But Lyra wasn't content with surface-level exchanges. She probed gently, sharing fragments of her own story, and encouraging him to open up in return. One afternoon, as Elliot adjusted the ship's energy matrix, a task that required painstaking precision, Lyra leaned against the wall, watching him intently. Her bioluminescent markings shimmered faintly, casting soft blue and green hues across the dimly lit workshop. The hum of the ship filled the air, steady and reassuring. "You are different from others of your kind," she said suddenly, breaking the silence. Elliot glanced up, startled. "What makes you say that?" She tilted her head, considering him, thoughtfully. "Most humans I've encountered are loud, impatient. They rush through life without truly seeing it. But you notice things. You care." Elliot chuckled dryly, returning his attention to the delicate wires in front of him. "If noticing broken stuff counts as caring, then sure. I guess I qualify." "It is more than that," Lyra insisted. "You listen. You understand. That is rare." Her words unsettled him, not because they were untrue, but because they struck too close to home. For years, Elliot had prided himself on staying detached, keeping people at arm's length. Machines didn't judge or disappoint. They simply needed fixing. Yet here was Lyra, an alien stranger, seeing right through his defenses. "Why does it matter?" he asked, deflecting. "I'm just doing my job." "No," she said firmly. "It matters because you chose to help me when you could have walked away. Because you touched the core when you didn't have to. Because—" She hesitated, her voice softening. "Because I feel something between us. Something real." Elliot froze, his hands hovering over the panel. He wanted to laugh it off, to brush aside her words as some alien sentimentality he couldn't possibly comprehend. But the truth was harder to ignore. Over the past few days, he'd started looking forward to their conversations, finding comfort in her presence. There was a warmth in her gaze, a sincerity in her tone, that made him feel seen in a way he hadn't felt in years. Before he could respond, the workshop door slid open with a metallic clang. A young human boy darted inside, clutching a small droid that sparked and sputtered in his arms. His face was streaked with dirt and his clothes were patched together from mismatched fabrics. "Please," the boy pleaded, his wide eyes darting between Elliot and Lyra. "Can you fix him? He's all I've got." Elliot sighed, setting down his tools. "All right, kid, let's take a look." As he examined the droid, Lyra knelt beside the boy, speaking softly to calm his nerves. Together, they coaxed the little machine back to life, its lights flickering brightly once more. The boy beamed with gratitude, hugging the droid tightly before running off into the crowded spaceport. Watching the exchange, Lyra smiled warmly. "You have a good heart, Elliot Carter. Do not deny it." He shrugged, avoiding her gaze. "Just another repair job." But later that evening, as they sat together outside the workshop, sipping cups of synth coffee under the artificial glow of Nova Port's ceiling lights, Elliot found himself opening up in ways he hadn't expected. He told Lyra about his childhood, how he'd grown up in a rough part of Earth's colonies, raised by a single mother who worked double shifts just to make ends meet. How he'd discovered his knack for mechanics early on, tinkering with scrap parts scavenged from junkyards. And how, after losing his mother to illness, he'd drifted from place to place, never quite feeling like he belonged anywhere. "I guess that's why I'm here," he admitted quietly. "Fixing ships keeps me busy, keeps me from thinking too much." Lyra listened without interrupting, her luminous eyes reflecting understanding. When he finished, she reached out hesitantly, placing a hand on his shoulder. The gesture was simple, yet it carried a weight that left him speechless. "You belong now," she said softly. "With me." For a moment, Elliot let himself believe her. The thought was terrifying and exhilarating. 2 days later, disaster struck. Elliot and Lyra were putting the final touches on the ship's propulsion system when alarms blared throughout the station. Red warning lights flashed overhead, bathing everything in an ominous crimson glow. Voices shouted in panic, footsteps echoed in chaotic rhythms, and the distant rumble of explosions shook the walls. "What's happening?" Elliot demanded, rushing to the workshop window. Lyra's expression darkened. "They've found me." Sure enough, a fleet of sleek black ships descended upon Nova Port, their insignias marking them as members of the Kalith Syndicate. Soldiers clad in reinforced armor poured out, weapons drawn, scanning every corner of the station. It wouldn't take them long to locate Lyra's distinctive vessel. "We need to leave." "Now," Lyra urged, grabbing Elliot's arm. "But the repairs aren't done," he protested. "The ship won't hold up in hyperspace if we push it too soon." "There's no time," she snapped, her usual composure cracking. "If they catch us, they'll destroy everything, including this station." Elliot hesitated, torn between logic and urgency. Then an idea struck him. "Wait, there's another way. Follow me." He led Lyra to a hidden maintenance tunnel beneath the workshop, a narrow passage he'd discovered during one of his late-night explorations of the station. It connected to a network of service corridors rarely used by anyone except maintenance crews. With luck, they could slip away unnoticed. As they navigated the labyrinthine tunnels, Lyra stayed close, her glowing markings dimmed to avoid detection. Every sound, the creak of metal, the distant echo of boots, sent their hearts racing. Twice they narrowly avoided patrols, ducking into alcoves until the danger passed. Finally, they emerged near the docking bay where Lyra's ship awaited. But as they approached, a group of soldiers blocked their path, rifles trained on them. "Stop, right there," one of them barked. Lyra stepped forward, raising her hands in surrender. "Take me if you must, but leave him alone. He has nothing to do with this." Elliot grabbed her arm, pulling her back. "No way. If you're going down, I'm going with you." His defiance surprised even himself. Just weeks ago, he would have gladly handed her over to save his own skin. But now, faced with the prospect of losing her, he realized he couldn't let her face this alone. The standoff was interrupted by a sudden surge of energy from the ship. Its runes flared brightly, pulsing in sync with the crystal core still exposed. Within, the ground trembled as the vessel lifted slightly off the ground, preparing to launch despite the incomplete repairs. "Get on board," Elliot shouted, shoving Lyra toward the hatch. Bullets ricocheted around them as they scrambled aboard. Once inside, Lyra took control, her hands moving swiftly over the console. The ship roared to life, its engines blazing as it shot upward, leaving the soldiers behind in a cloud of smoke and debris. As they broke free of Novaport's atmosphere, Elliot collapsed into a seat, breathing heavily. Well, he said, attempting a shaky grin. That was close. Lyra turned to him, tears glistening in her eyes. Why did you stay? You could have escaped. Elliot shrugged, trying to play it cool. Like I said before, I'm just doing my job. But deep down, he knew the truth. Somewhere along the way, Lyra Vex had become more than just a client. She was a friend, a confidant, maybe even something more. And though their journey was far from over, one thing was certain. Whatever lay ahead, they would face it together. The ship surged forward, leaving Nova Port far behind as it pierced the void of space. Its engines hummed with a power that felt almost alive, responding to Lyra's touch with an eerie intelligence. Inside the cockpit, Elliot sat stiffly in the co-pilot's seat, gripping the armrests tightly as the vessel accelerated. He had never traveled in anything like this before. His experience with spaceships was limited to clunky freighters and outdated shuttles, not sleek alien crafts that seemed to breathe and pulse with energy. Lyra remained focused on the controls, her glowing markings dimming slightly as she navigated through the chaos of their escape. Her expression was calm but resolute, masking the storm of emotions brewing beneath the surface. For now they were safe, but only temporarily. They'll follow us, she said finally, breaking the tense silence. The Calith Syndicate doesn't give up easily. Elliot glanced at her, his brow furrowed. How many ships are we talking about? Do you think we can outrun them? She hesitated, her fingers dancing over the console as streams of data flickered across holographic displays. Their fleet is faster than mine, but my ship has advantages they don't understand. Advantages tied to its core. If we can reach a safe zone, we might stand a chance. A safe zone? Elliot repeated skeptically. Like where? Lyra didn't answer immediately. Instead, she leaned back in her seat, closing her eyes for a moment as if gathering strength. When she spoke again, her voice carried a weight that made Elliot sit up straighter. There's a hidden system beyond known charts, a sanctuary my people used during the war. It's shielded by natural anomalies that make it nearly impossible to detect. We call it Valeth Haven. But you said your world is dying, Elliot pointed out. Wouldn't going there mean running away from your mission? No, Lyra replied firmly. The Haven isn't just a refuge. It's also home to ancient technology left behind by our ancestors. Tools that could help restore balance to my planet, or destroy it entirely depending on who wields them. She turned to him, her luminous eyes locking onto his. That's why the Syndicate wants the core. They believe it holds the key to unlocking those tools. Elliot let out a low whistle, leaning back in his chair. The stakes were higher than he'd imagined. What started as a simple repair job had spiraled into something far more dangerous and personal. He couldn't shake the feeling that every decision they made from here on out would have consequences neither of them could foresee. Hours passed as the ship hurtled through hyperspace, weaving between swirling nebulae and asteroid fields. Lyra kept watch while Elliot tried to rest, though sleep eluded him. His mind raced with questions about what lay ahead, and doubts about whether he was truly ready for this. He wasn't a hero. He was just a mechanic who preferred machines to people. Yet here he was, caught up in an interstellar chase with an alien woman who claimed fate had bound them together. When he finally returned to the cockpit, Lyra greeted him with a small smile. You look tired. I feel tired, Elliot admitted, dropping into the co-pilot seat. But I guess adrenaline helps. It won't last forever, she said softly. We're going to need more than adrenaline to survive this. Her words hung heavy in the air, underscoring the gravity of their situation. Elliot wanted to argue, to insist that they'd find a way out somehow, but deep down he knew she was right. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and flying blind into uncharted territory. The odds weren't exactly in their favor. Tell me something, Elliot said after a long pause. Why did you trust me? You barely knew me when you asked for help. Lyra tilted her head, considering the question. It wasn't just luck. My ship chose you. The bond you formed with the core, that connection meant something. And then there's you. Me? Elliot echoed, raising an eyebrow. Yes. she said simply. You're different, Elliot. Not because you're brave or clever, though both are true. It's because you care. Even when you try to hide, it. Her words caught him off guard, stirring emotions he wasn't prepared to confront. He opened his mouth to respond, but before he could speak, warning alarms blared throughout the ship. A red alert flashed on the console, accompanied by a series of beeping sounds. They're here, Lyra announced grimly, her hands moving swiftly over the controls. Outside the viewport, 3 black ships emerged from hyperspace, their sleek designs unmistakably belonging to the Kalith Syndicate, their weapons charged ominously as they closed in. Can we lose them? Elliot asked, gripping the edge of his seat. Not without risking damage to the core, Lyra replied. If we push too hard, the strain could destabilize it, and take us all with it. So what do we do? Elliot demanded, panic creeping into his voice. We fight, Lyra said decisively, but not alone. Before Elliot could ask what she meant, the ship shuddered violently as energy crackled around them. The runes on the hull flared brighter than ever, casting a brilliant glow that filled the cockpit. Then, without warning, the ship released a burst of energy that sent shockwaves rippling through space. The Syndicate vessels recoiled, momentarily stunned. What was that? Elliot exclaimed, staring at the display in awe. The core protects itself. And us, Lyra explained. But it won't hold forever. We need to act fast. Together, they worked frantically, coordinating their movements as the ship darted through the debris field created by the explosion. Lyra piloted with precision, dodging enemy fire while Elliot monitored the ship's systems, rerouting power to reinforce shields and stabilize the core. Despite the chaos, they moved in perfect harmony, each anticipating the other's next move. As the Syndicate ships regrouped and resumed their pursuit, Lyra spotted an opening, a narrow gap between 2 massive asteroids. Without hesitation, she steered the ship toward it, weaving through jagged rocks with hair-raising speed. Behind them, one of the enemy vessels collided with a stray asteroid, exploding in a fiery blaze. One down, Elliot muttered under his breath. 2 to go. The remaining ships pressed harder, launching missiles that streaked past the cockpit windows. One struck the hull, sending sparks flying inside the cabin. Elliot cursed loudly as smoke filled the air. We're losing. Stability, he shouted, scrambling to repair the damaged panel. Hold on, Lyra yelled, pulling the ship into a sharp turn. The G-forces pushed them both back into their seats as the vessel spun wildly, narrowly avoiding another missile. Finally, they burst free of the asteroid field, leaving the Syndicate ships behind. For a moment, they allowed themselves to breathe, slumping in relief as the danger faded into the distance. That was insane, Elliot panted, wiping sweat from his forehead. I'm starting to think I should have stuck to fixing mining drones. Lyra laughed softly, her tension easing slightly. And yet here you are, saving the galaxy, one repair at a time. Elliot shook his head, unable to suppress a grin. Don't get used to it. This kind of thing doesn't exactly come naturally to me. Maybe not, Lyra agreed, her gaze softening. But you're doing it anyway, and that's what matters. As the ship continued onward, heading toward the mysterious Valith Haven, Elliot found himself reflecting on everything that had happened. He still didn't fully understand why fate or whatever force governed the universe had brought him and Lyra together, but one thing was clear. No matter how dangerous the road ahead might be, he wouldn't trade this journey for anything. Because somewhere along the way, amidst the chaos and uncertainty, he'd discovered something unexpected. Not just purpose, but connection. And for the first time in years, Elliot Carter felt truly alive. The ship drifted silently through the vast expanse of space, its glowing runes dimmed to a faint pulse as if it too were catching its breath after the harrowing escape. Inside the cockpit, Elliot and Lyra sat in tense silence, their bodies weary but minds racing with thoughts of what lay ahead. The Syndicate ships had fallen behind for now, but both knew it was only a matter of time before they regrouped and resumed the chase. Lyra leaned forward, her fingers tracing patterns on the console as she studied the navigation screen. We're close to Valeth Haven, she said finally, her voice steady despite the exhaustion etched into her features. But there's still one obstacle. Elliot raised an eyebrow. One more? You mean besides the entire fleet hunting us down? She nodded grimly. To activate the Haven's defenses, we'll need to reroute energy from the core. It's risky. It could destabilize the ship temporarily, leaving us vulnerable. Vulnerable how? Elliot asked cautiously. If something goes wrong, the core might overload. It would destroy the ship and everything nearby. Elliot let out a low whistle, leaning back in his seat. No pressure then. Despite the gravity of the situation, Lyra managed a faint smile. You humans have such strange ways of coping. Humor keeps me sane, Elliot replied with a shrug. Besides, I figure if we're going down, I might as well go out laughing. His attempt at levity broke some of the tension between them, but the reality of their predicament remained heavy in the air. They couldn't afford mistakes, not when so much depended on reaching Valeth Haven safely. For Lyra, it wasn't just about survival. It was about fulfilling a mission that could save her people, or doom them forever. As they approached the hidden system, the ship's sensors picked up unusual readings. Swirling clouds of ionized gas surrounded the area, creating a natural barrier that obscured visibility and disrupted communications. Even the most advanced scanning technology struggled to penetrate the haze. This is why no one finds this place unless they know where to look, Lyra explained, her tone tinged with awe. Nature itself protects it. Elliot stared out the viewport at the swirling chaos outside. Looks like we're flying blind. Not entirely, Lyra assured him. The core will guide us. Trust it. Trust. That word again. Elliot wasn't sure he trusted anything anymore. Not the ship, not the crystal pulsing at its heart, and certainly not himself. But he didn't argue. Instead, he focused on helping Lyra prepare for the delicate operation required to access the Haven. They worked together in synchronized precision, each step bringing them closer to their goal. Elliot monitored power levels while Lyra adjusted the ship's systems, her hands moving deftly over the glowing panels. The bond they'd formed during their journey felt stronger than ever, almost tangible in the way they anticipated each other's needs without speaking. Finally, they reached the edge of the anomaly field. The ship shuddered slightly as it crossed into the dense cloud of energy, its hull vibrating under the strain. Alarms blared intermittently, warning of potential instability, but Lyra remained calm, her focus unshakable. We're almost there, she murmured, her eyes locked on the console. Just a little farther. Suddenly, the ship jolted violently, throwing them both against their seats. A cascade of sparks erupted from the control panel, accompanied by a deafening crackle of energy. Smoke filled the cabin as alarms screamed in urgent tones. What happened? Elliot shouted, scrambling to assess the damage. The core is destabilizing, Lyra cried, her voice tight with panic. I can't stabilize it alone. Without hesitation, Elliot grabbed his toolkit and crawled toward the exposed core chamber. The crystalline object pulsed erratically, its golden glow flickering dangerously. Heat radiated from it in waves, making sweat bead on his forehead as he worked frantically to recalibrate the connections holding it in place. Talk me through this, he yelled over the din. What do I need to fix? Lyra guided him step by step, her instructions clear and concise despite the chaos around them. Together, they managed to reroute excess energy away from the core, stabilizing it just as the ship lurched once more and emerged into open space. In front of them stretched a breathtaking vista, a ring of vibrant planets encircling a massive star, their surfaces shimmering with iridescent colors. At the center of the formation floated a colossal structure resembling a floating city, its spires adorned with glowing runes similar to those on Lyra's ship. This is Valeth Haven, Lyra whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. Our ancestors' legacy. But their relief was short-lived. Moments later, the telltale hum of enemy engines echoed through the void. The Syndicate fleet had caught up, surrounding them with menacing precision. They must have tracked us using residual energy from the core, Lyra said bitterly. We led them straight here. Elliot clenched his fists, frustration bubbling inside him. So what do we do now? Fight our way in? No, Lyra replied firmly. There's another way. Before Elliot could ask what she meant, she turned to face him, her luminous eyes filled with determination. I'll stay behind and hold them off. You take the core and activate the Haven's defenses. What? No! Elliot protested immediately. You can't sacrifice yourself for this. It's not a sacrifice, Lyra insisted. It's my duty. My people need me to protect their future, even if it means letting go of mine. Elliot shook his head vehemently. That's insane. We stick together, remember? That's how we've made it this far. For a moment, Lyra hesitated, torn between her mission and the growing bond she shared with Elliot. Then, with a deep breath, she reached out and placed her hand on his shoulder. You've done more than anyone could have asked of you, Elliot Carter. Now it's your turn to trust me. Her words struck a chord deep within him, stirring emotions he couldn't ignore. He wanted to argue, to insist that they fight side by side, but he knew she was right. This wasn't just about saving themselves, it was about preserving hope for an entire civilization. All right, he said finally, his voice thick with emotion. But promise me one thing. Anything, Lyra replied softly. Promise you'll come back. A faint smile touched her lips as she nodded. I promise. With that, they sprang into action. Lyra took control of the ship, luring the Syndicate vessels away from the Haven's entrance while Elliot carried the core toward the activation console. His heart pounded wildly as he navigated the unfamiliar corridors of the ancient structure, guided only by instinct and the faint glow of the crystal in his hands. When he finally reached the central chamber, he found a pedestal engraved with symbols matching those on the core. Placing the crystal onto it triggered a surge of energy that illuminated the entire structure, sending waves of light cascading outward. Outside, the Syndicate fleet recoiled as invisible shields snapped into place, sealing off the Haven from intruders. Back aboard her ship, Lyra watched as the enemy retreated, unable to breach the defenses. Exhausted but triumphant, she set course for the Haven, knowing she'd kept her promise to return to Elliot, and to the man who had become more than just a mechanic along the way. As their paths converged once more, neither spoke of what had transpired. Words weren't necessary. In the quiet moments that followed, they simply stood together, gazing at the shimmering horizon of Valeth Haven, united by a shared sense of purpose, and perhaps something even deeper. The days that followed, their arrival at Valeth Haven were a blur of discovery and reflection. The ancient structure, once dormant and shrouded in mystery, now hummed with life as its systems awakened under Elliot's touch. Lyra guided him through the labyrinthine corridors of the Haven, explaining the purpose of each chamber and the technology housed within. It was overwhelming, entire rooms filled with crystalline consoles that pulsed with light, walls covered in intricate carvings depicting stories of her people's history, and vast libraries containing knowledge older than humanity itself. Elliot marveled at it all, though he couldn't shake the feeling of being out of his depth. He wasn't an explorer or a scientist, he was just a mechanic who fixed broken things. Yet here he was, standing in the heart of an alien sanctuary, tasked with helping to unlock secrets that could change the fate of entire worlds. This is incredible, Elliot said one evening, as they stood on a balcony overlooking the central atrium. Below them, streams of golden energy flowed through translucent conduits, illuminating the space like sunlight filtering through stained glass. But I still don't understand why you trust me to do this. Lyra turned to him, her bioluminescent markings glowing softly in the dim light. Because you've already proven yourself, Elliot. You didn't have to stay. You could have walked away so many times. But you chose to help. That's rare and important. Her words stirred something deep within him, though he struggled to fully EPT them. Trust wasn't something he gave easily, nor was it something he felt he deserved. But every time he looked into Lyra's luminous eyes, he saw gratitude and something more. Something that made his chest tighten in ways he couldn't explain. As they delved deeper into the Haven's archives, they uncovered fragments of information about the crystal core and its role in stabilizing ecosystems. According to the records, the core amplified natural energies, creating harmony where there had been chaos. It was designed not as a weapon, but as a tool for restoration, a beacon of hope for dying worlds. However, the texts also warned of the dangers of misuse. If wielded carelessly, the core's power could unravel entire systems, leaving devastation in its wake. "It's beautiful," Elliot murmured as he studied a holographic projection detailing the core's functions. "But terrifying too. One wrong move and everything falls apart. That's why my people created safeguards," Lyra explained. "Only those who share a bond with the core can activate it safely. That's why your connection matters. It ensures balance." Elliot frowned, rubbing the back of his neck. "I'm starting to think fate has a twisted sense of humor. Me? Balancing entire planets? What happens when I screw it up?" "You won't," Lyra said firmly. "Not if we work together." Her confidence in him was both reassuring and daunting. For someone who spent most of his life avoiding responsibility, Elliot found himself shouldering more weight than ever before. But as long as Lyra believed in him, he resolved to try, not just for her sake, but for the countless lives depending on their success. Despite the wonders of Valeth Haven, shadows lingered over their efforts. The Syndicate fleet hadn't completely disappeared after retreating from the anomaly field. Though unable to breach the Haven's defenses, they remained nearby, watching and waiting. Lyra monitored their movements closely, knowing they wouldn't give up until they claimed the core, or destroyed anyone standing in their way. "They're persistent," Elliot remarked one night as they reviewed surveillance data. "Almost admirable in a creepy sort of way." "It's not admiration you should feel," Lyra replied grimly. "It's caution. They'll find a way in eventually. We need to act quickly." "And then what?" Elliot asked. "Activate the core and hope it fixes everything?" "No," Lyra said softly. "We'll need allies. My people alone can't rebuild our world, not without help." Elliot raised an eyebrow. "You mean humans?" "Yes," she said simply. "Your kind may lack experience with technology like ours, but you possess something equally valuable: adaptability. Humanity thrives in uncertainty, finding solutions even when odds seem impossible. That's why I believe you can make a difference." Her faith in humanity surprised him. After years of witnessing greed, corruption, and destruction among his own species, Elliot had grown cynical. But seeing the world through Lyra's eyes reminded him of the potential buried beneath humanity's flaws. Perhaps there was hope after all. Their preparations intensified over the following weeks. Elliot immersed himself in studying the core's mechanisms, learning how to synchronize its energy output with planetary systems. Lyra taught him the basics of Valeth language and culture, ensuring he understood the significance of the task ahead. Together, they devised a plan to reach Earth and rally support for Lyra's mission. But leaving Valeth Haven wasn't easy. As much as Elliot had initially doubted his place there, the Haven had become a second home, a refuge from the chaos of the outside world. Saying goodbye felt like stepping back into danger, armed only with fragile hope and determination. On the day of their departure, they stood together in the Haven's main chamber, surrounded by the glow of ancient technology. Lyra placed a hand on the pedestal holding the core, closing her eyes briefly as if bidding farewell to something sacred. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "For protecting this place, and for believing in me." Elliot shook his head, smiling faintly. "Don't thank me yet. We've got a long way to go." With that, they boarded Lyra's ship, the Haven shrinking behind them as they soared into the stars. Ahead lay unknown challenges, hostile forces, and the daunting task of convincing humanity to join their cause. But for the first time in his life, Elliot felt ready to face whatever came next. As the ship entered hyperspace, Lyra glanced at him, her expression softening. "We'll get through this, Elliot. Together." He nodded, meeting her gaze with quiet resolve. "Yeah. Together." And with that promise, they set course for Earth, carrying not just the weight of two worlds, but the hope of a brighter future written in the stars. The journey back to Earth was long and fraught with tension. Elliot and Lyra spent hours poring over maps, strategizing how best to approach humanity's leaders without sparking panic, or worse, hostility. They knew the stakes were high. Convincing an entire species to unite behind an alien mission would require more than logic or evidence. It would demand trust. And trust, as Elliot had learned during their time together, wasn't easily earned. As they neared Earth's orbit, the blue-green planet came into view, its beauty both familiar and breathtaking. For Elliot, it stirred memories of home, of crowded cities, sprawling deserts, and oceans that stretched endlessly toward the horizon. But for Lyra, it was a world unlike any she'd ever seen, teeming with life and potential. She gazed at it through the viewport, her luminous eyes reflecting. "Ah, this is where you come from," she said softly. "It's remarkable." Elliot chuckled, leaning back in his seat. "I wouldn't call it perfect. Humans are messy. We fight, we argue, we make mistakes. But yeah, it's got its moments." Lyra turned to him, her expression thoughtful. "Messy isn't always bad. Sometimes it's what makes us strong." Her words struck a chord deep within him. He realized she wasn't just talking about humanity. She was speaking about them. Their partnership had been messy too, filled with challenges neither of them could have anticipated. Yet somehow, they'd found strength in each other, forging a bond that transcended differences and defied odds. Their arrival on Earth didn't go unnoticed. Governments scrambled to respond as news spread of an unidentified alien vessel entering the atmosphere. Military jets intercepted them almost immediately, surrounding the ship with weapons trained and voices barking orders over radio frequencies. Elliot clenched the armrests tightly, glancing at Lyra. "Are you ready for this?" he asked, his voice low. "As ready as I'll ever be," she replied, her tone steady despite the uncertainty ahead. Together they transmitted a message, a plea for peace and cooperation. Lyra spoke first, addressing the assembled forces with calm authority. She explained who she was, where she came from, and why she sought humanity's help. Then Elliot stepped forward, adding his voice to hers. He spoke not as a representative of Earth, but as someone who had witnessed firsthand the gravity of Lyra's mission and the hope it represented. To their relief, the response was cautious, but open-minded. Representatives from various nations agreed to meet with them aboard an international space station orbiting Earth. It was neutral ground, free from political agendas or territorial disputes. As they docked and prepared to disembark, Elliot felt a mix of nerves and determination. This was it, the moment everything hinged on. Inside the conference room, delegates from across the globe gathered around a massive table, their expressions ranging from curiosity to skepticism. Lyra stood at the center, flanked by Elliot, as holographic projections displayed images of her homeworld, once vibrant and thriving, now scarred by war and decay. Her voice carried weight as she recounted the history of her people, the devastation they faced, and the role the crystal core could play in restoring balance. When she finished, silence hung heavy in the air. Finally, one delegate, a seasoned diplomat from the United Nations, spoke up. "Why should we risk our resources and potentially our safety for your cause? What guarantee do we have that this won't backfire?" Lyra hesitated, then gestured toward Elliot. "Ask him. He's seen what the core can do, not just destruction, but creation, healing." All eyes turned to Elliot, who shifted uncomfortably under the sudden attention. Taking a deep breath, he began to speak. He told them about his initial reluctance to get involved, about the dangers they'd faced, and about the haven they'd discovered. Most importantly, he shared his belief in Lyra, not as an outsider, but as someone fighting for a better future. It's not just about helping her people, Elliot concluded. It's about showing that we're capable of something greater, that humanity can rise above its flaws and work alongside others for the good of all. His words resonated deeply, breaking through the skepticism that had clouded the room. Slowly, tentative agreements began to form. Scientists volunteered to study the core, engineers offered their expertise, and diplomats pledged support in coordinating efforts. It wasn't unanimous, nor was it without conditions, but it was a start. In the weeks that followed, humanity rallied in ways no one had expected. Teams of researchers worked tirelessly alongside Lyra, deciphering the core's mechanisms and developing strategies to implement its power safely. Meanwhile, Elliot served as a bridge between worlds, translating technical jargon and cultural nuances, while Foster,